Initially I intended to go to law school. So my and probably because like I grew up watching LA Law, right? And Corbin Burnson drove a Bentley, and I'm like, I want to drive a Bentley, so I'm going to go to law school. So it's kind of funny the things that affect, that influence you.
This is the Gies Download, a podcast from the University of Illinois' Gies College of Business. I'm your host, Tim Sinclair, and today my guest is Brooke Elliott, EY Distinguished Professor in Accounting and Executive Associate Dean of Academic Programs. Brooke oversees the college's undergraduate, residential graduate, and online graduate programs. It's fascinating to compare what many people plan to do with their lives and what people actually do with their lives. For Brooke, her dream wasn't necessarily to break gender barriers in the highest echelons of academia, nor was her family history one that would suggest she would. But that's exactly what happened.
I grew up in a small town in southern Indiana, Bedford, Indiana. So it's just south of Bloomington. So like I'm a Hoosier by birth, right? And that means you're a Hoosier for life. So I'm a huge basketball fan, right? As soon as you can walk, you have to be able to dribble, right? Or else they'll kick you out of southern Indiana. So that's kind of, that's my background upbringing, but like small rural town, there was a Ford plant, a Chevy plant. So, it's pretty like blue collar, hardworking. So I tend to carry a lot of those characteristics forward in terms of just hardworking, gritty. And so I attribute a lot of kind of who I am and who I am as a leader back to where I came from. I ended up going to Indiana University because one, it's just like, that's what you did if you were from Southern Indiana, but it's a great school. Initially, I intended to go to law school. So and probably because like I grew up watching LA Law, right? And Corbin Burnson drove a Bentley, and I'm like, I want to drive a Bentley, so I'm going to go to law school. So it's kind of funny the things that affect, that influence you. But that was always my intent. It's why I chose to major in accounting, because at that time, if you majored in accounting, it was more attractive from a law school perspective. So I majored in accounting. My minor was in political science. I was going to go to law school. But I decided instead to stick around and do an MBA. And then once I got into the MBA, I had an opportunity to teach. I started to get exposed to what it meant to be in academia. And so I decided to pursue a PhD.
Growing up in a blue collar community, were your parents, did they have degrees? Like what was expected in the family? How was that?
So both of my parents had undergraduate degrees. My mom had a master's degree, but both of them were first generation college students. So both my mom and my dad. But, so I think the expectation was that I went to college, but it was new to our family, right? From an education perspective. My mom was a teacher for over 30 years. My dad ran an insurance agency, but there were pretty high expectations, but still very few, out of our hometown. When I think back, I went to a very large high school because it drew from all the rural counties. And so like my graduating class was, about 450, which I say very large, but very large for like rural Southern Indiana. And very few individuals from that class, actually went on to have professional success because it just wasn't the expectation coming out of that community.
I think all of us would like to think that women in business or women in leadership positions at universities, it happens just as often as men, right? We're at that point where everybody has equal opportunity, but I'm guessing that that's probably not the case.
No.
And hopefully there's been progress from when you started perhaps to where you are now, but what were some of the roadblocks, obstacles that you had in your way to sort of climbing that ladder?
Yeah, unfortunately, we might like to think that it's pretty equal opportunity, but it's still not. I think there were a lot of challenges, right? Even entering a PhD program. So I went to the University of Washington to pursue a PhD. Most business PhD programs, they're still populated with white males. That's what the typical profile looks like. And so it does provide some challenges in terms of, just being part of a cohort and building relationships, right? You tend to be in the minority. In business schools now, I took my first faculty position at the University of Illinois in 2003, right? And still women are underrepresented. And, at at an entry level, women are underrepresented, so at the assistant professor level. But then what you see, and I think what is probably most challenging, is as you move up through the ranks from assistant professor to tenured associate to full professor to endowed full professor to holding some type of administration perspective, there are fewer and fewer women as you move through. And so, I very starkly remember, I was an untenured faculty member in the Department of Accountancy. Each department tends to have an executive committee that is predominantly responsible for making decisions for the department. And for a long time, I was the only woman on that committee. And it is difficult. I was untenured. All the men were tenured. I often had different opinions. I often they were great scholars and I think tried to make decisions that they thought were in the best interest of the department and the college, but they brought a certain bias. And I think a lot of times it was, a subconscious bias to bear. And I was put in a position where I could either sit there and go with it, right? Or I could speak up. And I tend not to be, the type that, that kind of sits by. So I feel like it really provided an opportunity for me to be an advocate for women. But it didn't come without risk for me because I tended to be most of the time the only woman in the room.
They talk about, flight, fight, or freeze. I think I know the answer to this, but when in those situations early on, where did you find yourself most often?
Yeah, I was a fighter,
Yeah.
right? That's just my nature. Because I think because where I come from and kind of in my background. I will say though, like my approach has changed over time. So, I'm a very type A personality. And I tend to have a lot of characteristics that are traditionally assigned to males or men. And so I'm confident, I have a strong personality, I speak up quite a bit. And so I think early on, whenever I was moving up through the ranks, I tended to just let those characteristics dominate. And I tended to suppress any characteristics that might be more associated with a female or a woman. And I think that was a mistake because, it didn't allow me to exhibit to other women who might not have those traditional male characteristics that they could also be successful. And so I just tended to act more like a man. And then I was accepted by the men and I was very successful. But as I've grown over time, I recognize I can just be who I am, right? And I have strong characteristics. They don't always have to be associated with men versus women. And then I have other characteristics that I think a lot of men don't. I think I'm a very empathetic leader. I think I am a really good listener, right? And so those types of things I've allowed to really shine through more and to embrace. And I think it's in the end, I become a better leader and I become a better example. And I believe, am a better example for other women who want to follow my same path.
This may be a naive question, but do you think if you had done that from the beginning, you would be where you are today?
Yeah, that's a real hard question. I don't know. In all honesty, I did it the way I knew how to do it, or what I thought was the best way to go about it. And I'm not sure. I would have been in the same place, because I think you have to build some type of relationship with your peers and with those that you report to, right? And the easiest way for me to build that trusting relationship was me to play my characteristics that were most similar to those individuals. And I think that happens a lot, right? I mean, it's not isolated to this situation, but anytime, a lot of research shows that individuals tend to try to assimilate with a group that they're with, right? Whether it's a working group or whether, it's outside of work, a personal group. And so I think I did the same. But I do think I then put myself in a position where, I could shift how I led and how I conducted myself professionally.
What's it like now? You worked so hard to get where you are, and obviously you're still working hard, but now that you're in this leadership role, what are some of the challenges and or benefits that you see as being a woman in such a prestigious leadership role there at Gies?
I actually think a lot has changed in the time that I've been here. So I've been here 19 years, I'm coming up on 20, and in 2 decades, a lot has changed. I hope that, I was some part of that change, but I also think over time that other leaders, other women leaders in our college and on this campus and other male leaders actually have started to shift how they think about leadership and a recognition that having a group of leaders with a diverse set of backgrounds and experiences actually helps us to, make better decisions, and perhaps be more empathetic, and I think kind of resound more with the population that we're attempting to serve from a learner perspective, which is a very, very diverse population. And so I do think the environment has improved. I was a real advocate. I mean, I moved through several different administrative positions. I had an administrative position in undergraduate affairs. I was head of accountancy. I was the first female head of accountancy in our entire history. When I was head of accountancy, I was able to advocate for women, to hire more women, I promoted. So I was the second ever full professor in accountancy, female accountancy in our history. The last one before me was in 1958, and her name was Dorothy Litherland. And so, a lot of individuals, whenever I was promoted to full, and I was the first female professor in accountancy to hold an endowed chair. And I talked a lot about Dorothy, and they're like, it's so great that, you're the second female, faculty full professor in accountancy, and that you're first to hold an endowed chair. I'm like, it's really not that great. Like that the last one was in 1958, right? Like that. And then I thought about her and what she must have had, to endure to be able to get to that place. But then I was able, whenever I was head, I was able to advocate for other women. There was a second full female professor who also now holds an endowed chair. And so I saw just a lot of change. I hired an underrepresented female as a tenured faculty member whenever I was head of accountancy. And so you can, as a leader in an academic institution, like one by one, like one hire by a hire, you can affect a great change. And then I've seen what happens when those two individuals then attract other women, from a faculty perspective, from a student perspective, from a PhD student perspective. And so I see that change happening across our university. And because of that, I think it's a better environment now for women leaders than it was whenever I started here almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, and back then you were a professor in accountancy. Now you're an administrator. Do you miss that regular interaction? Was that just a means to an end? Are you truly doing now what you had set out to do?
No, so I love what I do now. But one, very few individuals, unless you have academic parents, grow up saying, I want to be a professor, right? I think if you have academic parents, it maybe often you do, because you see how enjoyable the work can be, how impactful it can be, and the type of flexibility that you have. But whenever I joined the accountancy faculty in 2003, I intended to be a faculty member like all of my life. I mean, it is an awesome job, right? I love to teach. You're allowed to pursue your own research agenda. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of autonomy. You surround yourself with the smartest people in the world. I mean, there really is no better job. And on days I'm like, why am I not doing that job anymore? But, I was relatively young so I finished my PhD at 27. And so I was an assistant professor at 27, which was not that old. I was a full professor with an endowed chair before I was 40. And so at that point, I was sitting around thinking, well, what am I going to do for the next 20 years? Do I want to continue to pour myself into teaching and research, or do I want to contribute in a different way? And at that point, I really started to think about, how did I think as an individual that I could have the greatest impact? Because that's really what's always driven me. It's the reason I love to teach. It's the reason I loved research, was to be able to have an impact. I really believe, and I think this comes from my background, like I believe in the University of Illinois and our land grant mission and expanding access to high quality education. And I think in teaching, that's why I love teaching, because I saw the difference that we could make in individual lives, that you could change in individual lives, that you could change an entire family trajectory. And that really resonated with me. And so at that point was kind of a turning point in my career. And I talked to actually one of my mentors is the former president of the University of Illinois and former dean of the Ross, Michigan School of Business, Joe White. And we had a lot of conversations about, what did I value? And did I think I could make the greatest impact, in my individual role as a faculty member, and to continue from a teaching and research perspective, or an administrative role. And I decided in an administrative role was the way I could have the greatest impact.
And the impact Brooke has isn't just being felt on the Illinois campus, it's being felt around the world, thanks to the Gies iMBA program, an affordable, exclusively online way for students, young and old alike, to get their master's degree.
It's just awesome. And it's honestly, it's the reason I agreed to take the first associate dean position that I was in. So I was head of accountancy. I love being head of accountancy for the greatest accountancy program in the world. Like, well, why would you want to move on from that? But then Dean Brown presented an opportunity for me to lead what we were doing in the iDegrees space. And that included the iMBA program, as well as overseeing, we have a very large and growing teaching and learning team. And because of like my passion for expanding access to education, I couldn't pass up an opportunity to lead a set of programs that were designed to do just that. I mean, those programs, the iMBA, IMSM, and IMSA, which are fully online, very affordable, very flexible, are our best example in Gies of living out the university's land grant mission. And it's just been amazing. I took that role in February of 2020. So like 4 weeks before we entered into the pandemic. And whenever I took that role in February of 2020, we had grown already from January of 2016. We had 116 students in our first cohort. We were at about 2,400 students in February of 2020. So that had already been like tremendous growth. And then from February 2020 and roll it through the pandemic to now, we're at nearly 5,000 students in that iMBA program. So like my 2 years in that position, we grew tremendously. And of course, like I'll take some of the credit, but most of it not, right? It's just like we had built this amazing reputation for delivering a very high quality, fully online MBA degree. And then individuals couldn't pursue residential education, right? And there was this new openness to doing things online. And we just happened, to be there. We'd made the right investments and we'd done it the right way. And what I see, from in terms of, I think all learners that we serve, but particularly for women, like you see the individual stories. There are women that like come up to me whenever, because we meet the students in person on campus at graduation. We have a huge event called I Converge, and they're like, thank you. Like I would have never been able to pursue an MBA if not for this program, because I'm a full-time professional. I have 3 kids at home. I have to try to triage all of these responsibilities. And some of those women come from Chicago. Some of them come though from, traditionally underserved communities and even like underserved countries, right? And so from an affordability perspective, it's not just that it's online, it's flexible. It's also that it's an MBA for under $23,000. And so it's very affordable. And so the way we've been able to, I think, transform a lot of lives, but particularly those for women, those who have other responsibilities, which a lot of women do, whether it's children or parents or just other personal responsibilities. The opportunities we provide are outstanding.
Do you see this as an opportunity for people who have already dreamed of doing this and now, this is my way to do it? Or do you feel like this program has inspired some people who might not have thought of it in the first place to go, oh, wait, I thought I had to be home here for 16, 18, 20 years with my kids and then I could pursue my dreams?
Yeah, it's really both. So, I mean, there are a lot of anecdotes, but just hearing the individual stories are outstanding. So some of the stories are, I've always wanted to pursue a graduate business degree, and I kept waiting for the right opportunity and the right time. And this program allowed me to do it now, where they thought that they were going to have to delay. And in all honesty, many of them thought the opportunity may have never presented itself, like the right set of circumstances. And then I've talked to others, because our program is so affordable and so flexible, because there is no on-campus requirement, who had not ever even thought about graduate business education. They're entrepreneurs. We have someone from Las Vegas that's in Cirque du Soleil. We have individuals that, they're entrepreneurs and they have a flower cart, and they started to recognize how this type of education, and particularly business education from a high quality institution like the University of Illinois, could help them to either pursue their own professional goals or within their organization, help them to grow within that organization. That's the story I hear a lot. So I think it's really both. And, we now serve more students in our online graduate programs than undergraduate and graduate residential combined, which, I mean, that's crazy. In a 6-year period, right, who we serve from a learner population has completely transformed, and we still have the same level and actually growing demand in our undergraduate residential and our graduate residential program. So our portfolio has only grown.
Coming full circle to you now, there is no online option for balancing your life at home with your work as an administrator. You got to do the work. You can't spread it out over extra years. It just is what it is. How have you managed that, navigated that, for better or for worse? I'm sure there's probably some of both.
Yeah, it is. I try to be very honest about this when people ask, and particularly when women ask, because I think the answer tends, a lot of individuals, when you look at other individuals who are very successful, and whether I'm using myself as an example or others, you tend to think that they have some superhuman qualities that others don't have, right? And letting that type of perception persist is very harmful, because then other women and other individuals will never attempt to pursue that. So I always try to be very transparent. I refuse to use the word balance, because balance always implies to me it's some like nice equilibrium, right? There is zero balance in my life. I always talk about it as a triage situation, which makes you think about an ER, right? And that's really how I approach my life. I mean, my family is extremely important to me. I'm also very active from a fitness perspective, but work also is very important to me. And what I always say is, like, some days I am the best leader at work and the best professional. And on those days, I am not the best mom, positively. And my kids would tell you that. And some days I'm the best mom, right? And I'm not the best professional. But, depending on what the demands are from each of those facets of my life, I triage them on that day. I do the best I can. And then I move on. And I think, that's something maybe that as I've grown as a leader, and I see a lot of women struggle with, is I try not to carry it into the next day. And I try not to carry guilt about the way that I decided to triage on a given day. I give it my best. I always believe I'm the best person for the job. And I reflect and try to continuously improve in each of those facets of my life each day.
A wise person once told me, balance doesn't have to be a scale that's always equal on both sides. Balance is more like a pendulum that swings from one extreme to the other, but ultimately results in giving the right energy to the right things at the right time. And it certainly appears from the results like Brooke is doing just that. Be sure to join us for the next Gies Download. In the meantime, you can learn more about Gies College of Business at giesbusiness.illinois.edu.